The Albanese government, as I said at the beginning of the program here, they are pushing ahead with implementing their new vehicle efficiency standard. This is a complicated issue, but it's one that deserves debate. Now, this is even as the Australian Automobile Association, which is the Motor Traders Association of Australia, and you have in there as well the Housing Industry Association, Toyota, and even the Prime Minister of Thailand, warning of impending issues with this plan to require car makers to sell more efficient cars. Now, for more, let's bring in the Environment Editor for The Australian, Graham Lloyd. Graham, always great to catch up with you. We have Chris Bowen in Question Time week after week after week, and then whenever he does a media interview, trying to confuse motorists by saying, if you live in Dubbo, when we bring in these new emission controls on vehicles, you'll save yourself $1,200 a year in petrol. This is not an argument about petrol and the amount of miles or litres per gallon that you do per kilometre, is it?
No, that's right. Good evening, Steve. This is a transition in the motor industry, much like the transition in the power sector. And the peak motoring body has had a look at what's been proposed, and they've really called it out for what it is. It's a transfer of cost from existing motor vehicles that people want to drive towards electric vehicles. They say to meet these standards, cars like the dual cabs and things that people want to buy now will have to become a lot more expensive, and electric cars will have to become a lot cheaper. So what we're going to see potentially is a sort of flood of Chinese cars coming in where those producers will only have electric cars. They'll receive subsidies and they will collect them from the Toyotas and the VWs and others who are going to be ground down like the coal industry is today.
Yeah, I was talking to a major motor retailer yesterday, and they have a combination of traditional petrol and diesel vehicles, and they have a fairly large electric car fleet. So they get bonus points for the electric cars, but penalised for the non-electric cars. So if you've got a motor retailer, Graham, I'll try and make this as simple as possible, who has very few electric vehicles in their fleets, they are going to have to charge more for their cars because of the penalties they're being given, or absorb that into their cost.
That's right. Anybody that's selling internal combustion engine cars is going to have to increase the cost of them and basically transfer a penalty across to those who are supplying battery-operated cars, whether that's internally or whether that's between manufacturers. And this is why Thailand is so upset that they're importing 200,000 cars per year to Australia, predominantly dual cabs. They're not going to meet these standards.
I had to laugh today, Graham. I was watching Chris Kenny in the previous hour, and the Prime Minister and Chris Bowen were out in Sydney, Western Sydney today, at Global Express headquarters, where they were spruiking the fact that they've spent $40 million on getting a fleet of electric trucks. Global Express obviously is a company that delivers parcels to people. But we then find out via Chris that 20 million of the 40 million came from the taxpayers.
Yeah, and this is the situation that's there. They're really providing great incentives and tax breaks to encourage people to take these things up. And it remains to be seen. There needs to be a durable second-hand market. These vehicles have to perform in real-world conditions. And the evidence from around the world is that consumers, even those who sort of jumped at the opportunity initially, are a lot more reluctant to buy an EV the second time around. This may change, but it's a tough ask, and we're looking at a big disruption in the industry, and it's quite possible that motorists will just decide, look, I'm just going to hang on to the car I've got.
I mentioned, Graham, at the start of the program, the business section of The Australian yesterday had a story that had some detail about renewable energy capacity and new projects. Investment in both solar and wind had dropped in the last 12 months by 80%. Now, they're trying to blame this, apparently, the industry on slow planning, environmental approvals, over rising costs and a tight labour market. But it would appear, if I'm not misreading that report from yesterday, that investment has really fallen off a cliff, Graham.
Well, that's right. The companies have really just closed their wallets because they're waiting for two things. They're waiting for the federal government to build a whole load of transmission lines so they can be sure they can connect up to the grid, and they're waiting for the government to tell them that they will underwrite the profitability of projects. So all this talk we heard about needing certainty through legislative targets and what have you kind of missed the point. What they want is certainty that taxpayers are going to make sure they make money. And there's probably good reason why they're concerned. If we're going to overbuild renewables to make sure that it's always there sometime, there's going to be a lot of capacity that's just sort of going to waste for large periods, and they're going to want to make sure they still get paid.
I'm very worried by a Victorian government announcement today. The Premier Jacinta Allen was out standing in front of a wind turbine saying that she and her government plan to accelerate the planning process for these renewable projects. They're going to remove the requirement for them to go before a planning panel, and she's going to and some of these things are taking, years to get approval. She's going to cut that down to 4 months. I fear that a lot of our friends in the bush, particularly our farming friends, are going to be confronted here with a government's going to say, well, bad luck, we know you don't like this in your paddock, but you're going to have it.
Yeah, look, there's a real authoritarian bent in the whole green transition. And as people are frustrated at the speed of the rollout of something they thought would be pretty easy, I think we're going to see that come to the fore. I mean, it's outrageous that communities don't have a big input into what's going to be foisted upon them, particularly given the experience of projects so far. Things are delayed for a good reason. There is a bad reputation of the industry on the way it has consulted. So the answer from Victoria seems to be, well, we'll just do away with the consultation.
Just briefly, Graham, I note today federal Labor is going to underwrite by more than $1 billion of our taxpayers' money in loans and grants to build this rare earth mine in the Territory and support a major WA lithium mine. If these mines are such great projects, why do they require the input of the Australian government? When did the Australian government suddenly become financier to a mine?
Yeah, it's a complex issue, this one, Steve. There's a great desire among free nations led by the United States to have an alternative supply of rare earths from China. And so they're subsidising production facilities to make sure they don't get cut off. But what we're really seeing is that industry is not always able to compete with what China's doing. They have a stranglehold on the market. They depress the price. Lithium, which everybody thought is going to be the big metal of the future, the price there has crashed along with nickel, and the outlook is a lot less certain. Government subsidies are always a dangerous thing, and particularly if we start chasing the sort of downstream processing where the Productivity Commission and others have said we don't really have a natural advantage.
Graham Lloyd, always a great pleasure to tap into your insights. Thank you very much for that. That's Graham Lloyd from the Australian newspaper.